You wake up tired, spend the entire day dealing with things, answering messages, running from one place to another, trying to keep up with life. But deep down there's a feeling that never really goes away, a silent emptiness, as if your mind is always full, but your soul keeps drifting farther away from peace. And maybe the most dangerous part of all this is that you've already started to think this is normal. This video is not about productivity. It's not about doing more. It's about understanding why so many people today feel emotionally exhausted, spiritually disconnected, and unable to experience true rest, even when their lives seem to be working, because there's a difference between being busy and being alive inside. And maybe the world has taught you to fill every minute of your routine, precisely so you never notice what's missing within you. If lately you feel like you've lost clarity, peace, presence, or even the ability to hear God in the middle of so much noise, stay until the end of this video, because what's draining your soul may not just be the exhaustion of life. It may be the way you've been living it. Many people today no longer know what it truly means to stop, even when the body slows down. The mind keeps running. There's always something waiting for a response, some unfinished task, some notification demanding attention, some thought draining your energy. And little by little, living in this constant state of busyness stopped feeling strange. It became routine. It became personality. It became the normal way to exist. The problem is that human beings were never created to live in a permanent state of acceleration. The mind can keep functioning for a while, but the soul slowly begins to wear down in silence. And this exhaustion rarely appears dramatically at first. It shows up in small ways, in the difficulty of feeling peace, in the inability to truly rest, in the feeling of always being tired, even after sleeping. There's a difference between having responsibilities and being emotionally consumed by them. But the modern world constantly blends these two things together. The busier a person seems, the more important they feel, as if slowing down were a sign of failure, as if stopping for a few minutes meant wasting time. And without realizing it, many people began building their entire identity around productivity. Maybe that's why silence feels so uncomfortable today. Because when everything becomes quiet, many people finally face what they spent the entire day trying to avoid: their inner emptiness, ignored emotions, accumulated exhaustion, anxiety hidden behind routine. And then they run back to the noise, not necessarily because they need it, but because they no longer know how to deal with their own inner world. In Psalm 46:10, there's a simple, yet deeply confronting phrase: "Be still and know that I am God." Notice that before clarity comes stillness, before perception comes silence. But the rhythm of modern life seems to work in the exact opposite way. Everything encourages urgency, instant reaction, constant distraction, and mental overload. You wake up and immediately grab your phone. Your mind is already moving before you even take a deep breath. News, messages, videos, pressure, comparisons, too much information. And maybe the most dangerous part is that this overload became so normal that many people no longer realize how emotionally saturated they are. There's a kind of fatigue that doesn't come only from work. It comes from constant exposure, from never fully disconnecting, from the invisible pressure to always be available, alert, and productive. And when someone lives like this for too long, they slowly lose the ability to notice what is happening inside them. An accelerated mind weakens discernment. You react more and perceive less. You live on autopilot, solving problems, following routines, moving through schedules, but losing presence. And when presence disappears, life starts feeling mechanical, as if the days are passing, but you are not truly living them. Many people today are physically present everywhere, but emotionally absent within themselves. They talk while thinking about something else. They rest without truly relaxing. They try to pray, but their minds cannot remain quiet for even a few minutes. Not because they are spiritually weak, but because constant hyperstimulation deeply changes the inner condition of a person. The modern world rewards speed, but God almost always works in depth, and depth requires attention, pause, and awareness. It's hard to perceive spiritual direction while your mind is being pulled by countless stimuli at the same time. Not because God stopped speaking, but because there is too much noise inside you. Maybe one of the most important questions is this: when did being busy become the same thing as being well? Because there are people who accomplish many things every day and still feel empty inside. They continue functioning externally, while emotionally becoming more exhausted. And the worst part is that many no longer even notice it happening. Maybe the problem is not only how much you do, but how rarely you stop. Because when life becomes constant movement, the soul loses space to breathe. And without realizing it, you begin surviving in a rhythm that slowly drains your peace, your clarity, and your inner connection. There's a silent difference between living and merely surviving your own day. And many people crossed that line without noticing. They keep waking up, working, solving problems, fulfilling responsibilities, but internally live in constant exhaustion, as if life stopped being experienced and became something that simply needs to be managed. Maybe you know this feeling. The day ends, and you feel like all your energy was spent just trying to keep up. No presence left, no clarity left, no emotional strength left. And even when you finally have time to rest, your mind remains restless, as if the body stopped, but the inside of you is still trapped in survival mode. The dangerous part is that survival mode does not seem harmful at first. Externally, the person keeps functioning, keeps working, keeps answering messages, keeps smiling sometimes, keeps doing what needs to be done, but internally, something slowly weakens. Joy feels distant, silence becomes uncomfortable, and peace starts feeling like a fading memory. Many people today live emotionally numb, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much all the time, too much stimulation, too much worry, too much comparison, too much mental pressure. And when the mind remains overloaded for too long, the heart begins operating only in survival mode, just trying to make it through another day. Maybe that's why so many people say they're tired, even when they cannot fully explain why. Because it's not only physical exhaustion, it's accumulated emotional fatigue. It's the constant need to keep functioning, even while internally drained. And this creates a kind of emptiness that's difficult to describe. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Notice something important here. Jesus is not speaking only to busy people. He's speaking to overwhelmed people. People carrying too much weight for too long. People who lost inner rest. And maybe the saddest part is that many people no longer know how to recognize their own emotional exhaustion. They became so used to silent anxiety that they started calling it normal life. They became so used to an accelerated mind that true rest now feels strange, as if slowing down creates guilt. You can even see this during moments when you're supposedly relaxing. A person sits down to rest, but immediately grabs the phone, opens videos, switches between apps, searches for quick distractions, because being alone with their own thoughts became uncomfortable. There's a silent fear of facing what has been hidden beneath constant busyness. But ignoring exhaustion does not remove it. It only prolongs it, and eventually, the body keeps functioning, while the soul starts showing signs of burnout. Patience fades. Sensitivity fades. Emotional presence fades. Everything feels heavier than it should, and internally, there's that difficult feeling to explain, as if something inside is slowly fading away. The most dangerous part of survival mode is that it steals depth from life. You stop noticing beauty in simple things. You stop feeling gratitude naturally. You stop experiencing moments fully. Everything becomes a task. Everything becomes an obligation. Everything becomes something to finish quickly. And little by little, life loses its ability to touch your soul. Many people try to heal this emptiness with more distraction, more consumption, more stimulation, more busyness. But the problem is not lack of entertainment. It's excess in a disconnection. Because no amount of external noise can restore an emotionally exhausted soul. And maybe that's exactly why something inside you feels tired in a different way. It's not only sleep. It's not only stress. Maybe it's your soul trying to show you that this constant rhythm of survival is consuming important parts of who you truly are. There is a battle happening every day for your attention. And most people no longer notice it, because the problem is not only the time you lose, but the mental state being created inside you through constant distraction. Little by little, the mind loses the ability to remain present. Everything needs to be fast, immediate, and stimulating, and silently. This begins affecting even your spiritual life. Do you notice how difficult it has become to remain in silence for a few minutes, even during moments of rest? The mind keeps searching for stimulation. Videos, notifications, social media, music, endless information. As if the brain forgot how to simply exist without distraction. And the more this happens, the harder it becomes to experience inner depth. A hyperstimulated mind keeps receiving information, but loses the ability to absorb things deeply. Everything becomes quick consumption. Everything moves too fast. And after a while, a person begins feeling emotionally fragmented, as if their attention was scattered everywhere at once. In 1 Kings 19:12, Elijah expects to find God in the wind, the earthquake, and the fire. But God's presence comes through a gentle whisper. And maybe this reveals something important. God often speaks in stillness, not in noise, not in constant acceleration. But the modern world has almost removed silence from people's lives completely. There is always something competing for space inside your mind. And when your attention is constantly consumed, discernment weakens. You react faster, feel more anxious, compare yourself more, and lose emotional clarity more easily. Not because God moved away from you, but because there is too much noise inside you. Social media, for example, does not only compete for your time, it competes for your perception, your peace, and your ability to remain present. The more fast stimulation a person consumes, the harder it becomes to experience inner rest, emotional depth, and spiritual clarity. Maybe that's exactly what so many people feel today, a full mind, but an empty soul. Too much information, too much comparison, too much noise, and too little silence. The problem is that no one hears direction clearly while emotionally drowning in constant distraction. Many people say they no longer feel God the way they once did. But maybe the question is not only where is God? Maybe the question is, how much silence still exists inside you? Because there is a difference between God stopping speaking and your mind no longer being quiet enough to notice. This does not mean abandoning responsibilities or escaping the world. It means recognizing that whatever constantly occupies your attention slowly shapes your inner condition. The way you feed your mind daily directly influences your peace, your anxiety, and your emotional clarity. Do you notice how overstimulation creates a constant sense of urgency? How everything seems to demand an immediate response? Living this way, the soul never slows down enough to breathe, never slows down enough to reorganize emotions. And little by little, mental exhaustion turns into inner emptiness. Maybe God is still speaking to you in simple ways, but the noise of the modern world has made it difficult to hear the whisper. And while your attention keeps being consumed by everything around you, your soul will continue struggling to find presence, clarity, and true peace. If this video is speaking to you so far, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, because many emotionally exhausted people are living this exact reality. And maybe the next videos can help you recover inner rest in the middle of modern chaos. There's something interesting about the way Jesus lived. Even surrounded by crowds, needs, and people constantly seeking answers, he never seemed controlled by hurry. He never carried the anxious urgency that controls so many people today. Jesus lived with purpose, but not desperation, with direction, but not constant acceleration. And maybe this matters, because the modern world has taught people that living fast means living correctly, as if slowing down were irresponsible, as if resting meant wasting time. But the more people try to control everything and keep up with everything at once, the more emotionally exhausted they become. In Mark 6:31, Jesus says to the disciples, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Notice this. Rest does not appear as distraction or escape. It appears as a spiritual and emotional necessity, because even people living with purpose need to stop, breathe, reorganize the mind, and restore the soul. Yet many people today live as if everything depends entirely on them. They carry responsibilities without pause, keep their minds constantly alert, and feel guilty when they try to rest. There is always the feeling that something still needs to be done, and this constant inner pressure slowly consumes peace. Jesus never tried to prove his value through productivity, while the modern world turns busyness into identity. Jesus demonstrated presence, depth, and clarity. He walked slowly enough to notice people. He listened carefully. He remained fully present in each moment. Maybe one of the greatest differences between the rhythm of Jesus and modern life is exactly this: depth. Today, everything is fast, fragmented, and superficial. People do many things at once, but are rarely fully present in any of them. The body is in one place, while the mind is trapped in the next problem or worry. And living this way creates a silent exhaustion that's difficult to explain, because the human soul was never created to remain permanently accelerated. There is an emotional limit to how much inner weight a person can carry before disconnecting from themselves. And when that limit is crossed for too long, life slowly begins losing its color internally. Jesus often withdrew from the crowds to remain in silence and prayer, not because he rejected people, but because he understood something many have forgotten. Without inner stillness, the soul loses clarity. Without pause, the heart becomes confused. Without presence, even meaningful things begin feeling empty. Maybe you were taught to believe that slowing down means losing time, but maybe slowing down is exactly what your soul needs to breathe again. Because living emotionally overloaded all the time is not strength. Many times, it is simply accumulated inner disconnection. There's a difference between carrying purpose and carrying constant pressure. Jesus never invited people to live emotionally crushed. On the contrary, his presence brought clarity, inner reorganization, and rest. Not the absence of problems, but peace in the middle of them. And maybe what's exhausting you is not only the amount of things in your life, but the emotional rhythm you're using to carry all of it. Because when the soul remains accelerated for too long, even what should bring meaning slowly begins turning into weight. Many people spend years trying to fill an emptiness that never truly disappears. They change routines, search for distractions, consume more content, and keep their minds busy. But at the end of the day, that feeling remains. A silent exhaustion, an emptiness difficult to explain, as if something inside still feels disconnected, even when life externally seems fine. And maybe the most confusing part is that this emptiness does not always feel spiritual at first. Often it appears as constant exhaustion, lack of enthusiasm, emotional numbness, or the feeling of living on autopilot. A person believes they simply need more rest, when something deeper is actually happening inside. In Psalm 42:2 it says, "My soul thirsts for God. There is a thirst that is not physical, an inner need that cannot be filled by stimulation, distraction, or productivity." Because a person can constantly feed the mind and still remain spiritually empty. The modern world offers distraction for almost everything. They always occupy attention, numb emotions, or avoid silence. And for a moment, it seems to work. A person laughs, stays entertained, feels temporary relief. But soon after, the emptiness returns. Because distraction may relieve temporarily, but it never deeply restores. Maybe that's why so many people today are emotionally exhausted while constantly entertained. Too much consumption, but little presence. Too much information, but little clarity. Too much digital connection, but almost no real depth. And slowly, the soul begins feeling the effects of this silent disconnection. Social media created a constant feeling of connection between people, but often increased inner emptiness. Because being surrounded by stimulation does not mean experiencing true belonging. And the more someone tries to fill the soul with quick emotional consumption, the more superficial life begins to feel. There is a kind of pain that cannot be healed only through physical rest, entertainment, or temporary distractions. Because some pain comes from the absence of spiritual depth, from losing inner direction, from the disconnection between what the soul truly needs and what daily life keeps offering. And maybe what you feel is not only mental exhaustion. Maybe there is a part of your soul trying to get your attention, not through loud screams, but through this silent emptiness that keeps returning even when your schedule is full. Because the human heart was created for more than endless survival. Many people live so consumed by constant activity that they no longer realize when they lost inner presence. They continue functioning normally, but stopped feeling depth in simple things. Peace became distant, clarity became rare, and the presence of God started feeling buried beneath emotional noise. But emptiness is not always failure. Sometimes it is a silent warning that your soul is trying to return to what truly sustains it, because there is a difference between filling time and filling the inner life, and no distraction can replace true peace. Maybe that's why something inside you still feels tired, even when you try to rest, because some parts of the soul do not need more stimulation. They need presence, silence, space to breathe again away from the excess that has slowly consumed your clarity, your peace, and your inner depth. Silence has become uncomfortable for many people, not because there is something wrong with it, but because it reveals what busyness hides. While the mind stays occupied constantly, there is little space to notice the true inner condition. But when life slows down, exhaustion appears, anxiety appears, emptiness appears. Maybe that's why so many people unconsciously avoid stillness. The phone is always nearby. There is always another video, another distraction, another conversation available, because remaining in silence with yourself became difficult, and little by little, living distracted started feeling easier than living aware. But constantly escaping silence comes with an emotional cost. The soul needs pauses to reorganize thoughts, emotions, and inner direction. Without that, a person keeps functioning externally, while internally becoming more fragmented. Constant movement, but very little real presence. In Isaiah 30-15 it says, "In quietness and trust is your strength." This is almost the opposite of modern logic. The world teaches that strength comes from accelerating more, producing more, and reacting faster. But God often works differently. He restores in silence. He reorganizes in rest. He brings clarity when the noise fades. And maybe one of the most important things you need to understand today is this: spiritual rest is not laziness. Slowing down does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means recognizing that your soul was never created to live permanently overloaded. There is a difference between carrying purpose and carrying constant exhaustion. Many people believe they must solve everything before experiencing peace. But true peace rarely comes from controlling circumstances. It comes from inner presence, from remaining whole even in chaos. And this begins when you stop constantly running from yourself. There is a silent healing that happens when someone finally stays a few minutes without distraction, without trying to prove anything, without filling every second with stimulation. Just breathing, slowing down, allowing the soul to breathe again too. Because maybe your mind has been trapped in survival mode for far too long. Jesus never demanded perfect emotional performance to offer his presence. He never told exhausted people to fix themselves before coming close to him. On the contrary, his presence has always been a place of rest for overwhelmed souls. Maybe that's why people feel something different when they truly slow down for the first time. At first, there is discomfort. The mind still feels restless. Thoughts still feel loud. But little by little, the soul begins breathing again. Sensitivity returns. And what once felt empty slowly begins recovering depth. Not every urgency deserves your energy. Not every notification deserves your attention. Not every pressure should control your mind. And maybe part of the peace you lost is hidden in the silence you've avoided for so long. Because while the world keeps trying to accelerate you, God continues working quietly, deeply, and gently. Not to remove you from life, but to keep your soul from being consumed by the noise of the modern world. Maybe your soul does not need more stimulation right now. Maybe it simply needs presence again. Space to breathe. Space to exist without constantly living in survival mode. And many times, restoration begins the moment you stop running from silence. There is a difference between living busy and living full of peace. And maybe, for a long time, you tried filling your life with constant movement without realizing how exhausted your soul was becoming in the process. Because the modern world teaches you to keep functioning, even when you are already emotionally drained inside. But the fact that you made it this far in the video may mean something important. Maybe there is a part of you that has already started realizing that this accelerated rhythm is no longer sustaining your peace, your clarity, or your inner presence. And recognizing that is not weakness. In fact, it may be the beginning of a silent transformation. In Matthew 11:28, Jesus still speaks the same words today. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Not superficial rest, not merely physical rest, but rest for the part of you that feels emotionally overwhelmed. Rest for a soul that has spent too much time living under constant pressure. Maybe you tried to rest through distraction, entertainment, endless information, or constant busyness. But some parts of the human soul are not restored by noise. They are restored by presence, by stillness, by the feeling that you no longer need to keep running all the time. And maybe God never walked away from you in the middle of all this chaos. Maybe the problem is simply that the excess noise left your soul too exhausted to recognize His presence clearly. Because the more accelerated the mind becomes, the harder it is to hear what is quiet, deep, and true. You were not created to survive emotionally exhausted every day. You were not created to live permanently anxious, fragmented, and disconnected from yourself. There is another way to live, a way where your soul can breathe again, where peace does not depend on absolute control, where presence matters more than constant productivity. And this does not mean abandoning responsibilities or escaping reality. It simply means stopping the sacrifice of your inner peace just to sustain a rhythm that is slowly consuming you. Because in the end, no full schedule can replace a soul at peace. Maybe it's time to lower the noise a little, slow down the pace, reduce the stimulation that has been occupying too much space inside your mind, not to escape life, but to finally feel it again in a real way, to recover clarity, sensitivity, presence. And before you leave this video, do something simple. Stay in silence for a few moments, without immediately grabbing your phone, without searching for another distraction. Just breathe deeply and notice how your soul truly feels. Because maybe there is a kind of exhaustion inside you that never needed more pressure, only more presence. And if this video spoke directly to you, subscribe to the channel. There are still many people living emotionally exhausted without understanding what is happening inside them. And maybe the next videos can help you recover peace, clarity, and spiritual depth in the middle of modern chaos. You do not need to keep living full of tasks and empty inside